All right, folks, one of my most anticipated films of the year, All Quiet on the Western Front, dropped on Netflix this past Friday. Let's talk about it. Yes, folks, you did not mishear me in the intro. This was one of my most anticipated films of the year, especially now that the field has thinned. It was one of my most anticipated of the year remaining, and these last few months are stacked, I'll be honest with you, at least in anticipation value. And I have to say, it disappointed me quite a bit. Now, certainly there are moments here that are stellar, that stood out to me, that really made me feel the impact of this war, because that is what All Quiet on the Western Front as a story is about. I haven't read the book, but I did see the original, and it's obviously a very well-known concept that it is very anti-war from the German perspective, how these young children were brainwashed to this fight. They saw their friends die. They lost so many along the way, just loss after loss after loss, and truly just showing you the complete futility of war and how it torments the youth of our nation, and how in this one actually does a good job that the original doesn't, and I don't know if the novel touches, of how the people in power aren't as sympathetic to the cause, to the deaths of these soldiers that are fighting for them. They don't even know the horrors that they undergo and experience, and so I thought that was a neat element that this one added on to. And there are moments throughout where I was impacted by that. By and large, that was not how I felt. And I have to be honest, it is a little difficult to say exactly why that is, because obviously I went in wanting to feel that way. I was expecting to feel that way. And so maybe it's just the expectation, but I do have a few theories as to why I just felt so detached. I gave a review of Till a few weeks ago, and it was unfortunately a negative review. And it's not because I didn't appreciate what they were going for. It is because I thought it was very dramatic and just telling this story in a way that I felt was manipulative. And I think that definitely could also be said for All Quiet on the Western Front. I think it is a film that is absolutely in every scene trying its absolute hardest to get you to feel this way. And I think as a result, I as an audience member felt that and disconnected from the movie, just because I like to be carried along to these things. I don't like to be shoved into feeling a certain way when I watch a film. And so I have to say, I think that definitely decreased my overall opinion of the film. I will say before we go any further that I very much enjoyed the technical aspects of the film. The film looks phenomenal. Some of the best cinematography of the year. The score was, it was rather good, I'd say. The cinematography here is the real standout, and I just think it's absolutely phenomenal stuff. I don't know how many other technical elements I would praise. I guess production design, really good job of recreating the feel of the Western Front itself, in the trenches, in the French countryside, and all that stuff. Another thing I would say is that I was not all that invested in the characters. The performances were not my favorite, but I don't necessarily know that they were bad. I don't know that I would call them bad, but especially Paul, who's this main character, who we're supposed to attach ourselves to. And this is a thing that a lot of films do. This is just a very well-known narrative technique. But Paul is a bit of a blank slate, because I think the director wants us to imprint ourselves on Paul. The story wants us to be in Paul's shoes, and the less characterization he gets, the more we can feel ourselves in this story. And sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. And you really got to have a strong supporting cast, a strong ensemble around Paul, and just a strong narrative if you want to pull that technique off. And I don't know that this film had that. I was not invested in really any of the characters. And I have the same problem with a film like Dunkirk. I feel super disconnected from that film for the same reason, because nobody here feels interesting. I don't particularly care about what is happening to any of these characters. He meets his friends in the beginning of the film. They all go off to war, and of course there's the dramatic irony of knowing the audience knows what's going to happen to these characters, and yet when it happens, I personally wasn't particularly affected. Now, there are a few exceptions. There are some scenes that are just so unbelievably like grotesque and just dark that you kind of have to feel that way. I have one specifically in mind. And then there's also some characters like Kat is a character that was well fleshed out. And obviously they put a ton of time and attention and care into his character. He gets letters read to him from Paul, from his wife, and we learn more about his family and whatnot. And so he's a character that I did feel rather attached to, but just about everybody else in this film didn't care for. And then I think it's just worth mentioning that long film, 2.5 hours. I thought it was going to be over at a certain point, and then it kept going. And it's also just the pacing of the film, right? And it's not helped by the fact that the war just undergoes. You're in the final days of the war throughout the film. I believe the story starts like less than a week, I think even, until the war ends. And it just feels, look, I don't know what to tell you. It's very slow pacing that we go along here. And the film doesn't do enough to keep me engrossed as the film progresses. The film overall was rather bland. I don't know that All Quiet on the Western Front needed to be remade. And if it did, I would have appreciated not just technical improvements like the film definitely did, but just general improvements on the characters, on the story here. Because you have a film like 1917, and I said this in my Letterboxd review, just a bit of a joke, this is a mid-1917. 1917 came out 2 years ago, 2019, and we're in 2022. And it's just a shockingly good film. Is it a little boring at times? Yes. The pacing problems, absolutely. Technically proficient? Absolutely. More technically proficient than All Quiet on the Western Front. A better World War I narrative here. An incredibly strong ensemble. A really nice gimmick that works very well for the film and the story it's trying to tell. Just a great narrative that also gives us a peek into World War I, how it existed through the lens of a soldier, which is something that All Quiet on the Western Front also provides, but from a German perspective. And I appreciated 1917 a lot more. I think that's generally a better film, as well as more of a cinematic achievement. And so All Quiet on the Western Front just feels, in comparison, coming out 3 years later, even less significant. So I know I sound rather harsh here. I do think it was a well-made film. I do think it has enough to say that as of right now, I gave it a positive review. I gave All Quiet on the Western Front a B, just so slightly, because I do think there's enough here. But of course, when there's a film that's liked as much as this one is, I think I have to spend more time justifying why I fall in the opposite camp, which I did. So folks, if you've seen the film, let me know what you think. As for whether or not the original or this one is better, I think they're rather on par, actually, because the original just is very good for the time, obviously, but very dated as well. And if I thought this one was boring, the original certainly has it beat in that regard. Anyways, folks, I've been EDPC Reviews. You've just been the absolute best. I hope that my rest of anticipated films list for the rest of the year does not let me down like this one did. If you disagree with me, let me know. If you agree with me, let me know. Folks, I've been EDPC Reviews. You've just been the absolute best, and I will see you on the Western Front. Bye-bye.